My name is Will Holladay. I'm a freelance roof cutter and author of A Roof Cutter's Secrets to Framing the Custom Home, originally published in 1988. I've been involved in construction since the early 70s, and I was lucky to catch the tail end of the building boom in Southern California, where I learned production roof cutting techniques before everybody switched over to trusses. In the late 70s, I moved to Santa Barbara, California, where I was a framing contractor for 15 years, specializing in large custom homes. Nowadays, I kind of go where the work is. Work for friends in California, Oregon, Alaska. So if any of you guys know of any good cutting jobs, let me know. I'll get my card out later. What we're going to work on today, what I got planned is we're going to frame a 6-foot dormer into this roof right here. If you can imagine. Oh, bring your calculator. Did everybody? It's really beneficial if you guys have a calculator. You can follow along, and also you can check my math. What we're going to do is, if you can imagine, we got a short wall and a tall wall. Basically, I'm going to show you guys how to calculate tall wall heights, beam heights, purlin heights. Then we're going to go ahead and frame a rake wall that fits between the front wall and the back wall. Great artist that I am. Then we need to cut a handful of rafters between these, on top of these two walls, so we can stick two little angle walls, a head out, a ridge, and stick a common gable on. We'll cut some inside valleys and some valley jacks. I'm going to be demonstrating production roof cutting techniques today where special tools are required. I'm going to try to do a little blurb on the tools that were used in the past and the ones that are available in the present and where you guys can purchase them. Some of the saws that I will be using today have the guards removed for filming purposes. This is not approved by OSHA, Skill Saw, Journal of Light Construction, Tools of the Trade, or myself. So just be aware of that. It's good. You can get a couple good shots if you can see the blade of some of the stuff we're doing. I am not a mathematical wizard. Okay, I've read several books, roof books by guys, and they totally lose me. They totally lose me. I try to keep things very simple and very straightforward. And I kind of came up with a little system. I work off of a system that I call line length and rise ratio, and we're going to go over that. But I really believe that people make roof cutting much more complicated than it needs to be. And I'm going to show you the method I use. If you guys have read my book, you'll see you'll already be accustomed to what I do. The method I use doesn't require a fancy calculator, roof calculator. It does not require rafter tables, and it does not require a computer program, which I understand is available. You can punch in, it'll give you everything. All I use is just a low-budget calculator and a bunch of ratios that I have in the back of my book, but I'm going to show you how to figure them so you don't even need this. There is one page I have in the back here somewhere, if I can find it, that has all the ratios you need for every pitch, common and hip and valley. So basically this one page does everything your rafter tables will do if you know how to use it. And there's another page that has a rise ratio, which you find the height. You can use this table to find the height of any wall, any purlin, or whatever. Anyway, I'm going to show you, so you don't even need the book, I'm going to show you how to find them. It's trigonometry. If we take a triangle, everything we're going to be working with today is a 5 and 12 pitch roof. Pythagorean's theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, we come up with a hypotenuse of 13. If we take the 5, divide it by the 12, we come up with a ratio of 0.4166. In trigonometric terms, which I didn't know that this was trigonometric terms until after I figured this stuff out, I call it a rise ratio, okay? But if you were to look in a math book or something, they would call this, I think it's sine. Correct me if I'm wrong. sine of an angle. I call it rise ratio. I found out it was sine a long time afterwards. If we take, we'll use this ratio to figure any height change throughout the building. Okay, if we take the 13, the hypotenuse of the triangle, and divide it by the 12, we come up with a ratio of 1.833. That is what I call the common line length ratio. That is actually the secant of the angle in mathematic terms. We will use this ratio to find any length along the angled surface. Okay, so anything we're going to find here, top plates, line length of common rafters, anything along that, we're going to use this ratio. The third ratio we need is called what I call the hip-valley line length ratio. Now it is, we would use it to find anything in the hip or a valley as long as it's a regular. We're dealing with regular roofs here, okay? Now that is a little bit different. If we were to look down on a hip, for each 12 inches the hip goes, you've got a diagonal distance of 16.97. A lot of you guys, I'm sure this is review, but I got to do a little bit of it. Okay, if we take this distance, this diagonal distance, and set it up to another triangle with 16.97 is the run and 5 is the rise, we'll come up with 16.97. Now, to find the hip-valley line length ratio, we take this 16.9, we divide it by the unit of run of 12, and we would come up with, so we'd 17.69 divided by 12, we'd come up with 1.4743. You notice I looked on the ground because the first thing I do when I come on any job is I take and write these three things on my set of prints, and I also write it on the floor. So I never have to remember anything again. I just keep looking there, and I've got it. So this we call the hip-valley line length ratio. Okay. And one other thing we need, and that you can just take off your squangle, is what's the degrees of the pitch we're working with. You know, you just sit here and let's say we're working with 5 and 12. We just slide over 5 and 12, and we got 22.5 degrees. That's how I do it. I got another little chart back there that says it in degrees, but I never look at it. So we got everything we need for this standard pitch roof. Let's go ahead and move into, oh, that's pretty. Let's move into figuring tall walls, purlins, ridge walls, whatever. I kind of want you guys to imagine that this is a ridge beam, if you would, and that we basically have a lapping common rafters coming up here. It is only a shed right now, but when we get to cutting them, I'm going to show you how you can lap them up here. So what I have here as a mock-up is I've got a 24-inch tall wall here. I've got an over measurement of 96, so from same side here to same side back here, I've got 92.5 inches. You'll notice I'm not using feet and inches. I never use feet and inches. Right away I change all my dimensions to inches only. I have less problems, and besides I can multiply everything out that way. I don't like changing back and forth from feet to inches. So we're going to use an example, this little mock-up, and figure the height of this wall. We're dealing with 5 and 12. Okay, we've got from our outside wall, it's 24 inches, over to our tall wall. What's the height of this? We've got 92 from here to here. 92.5, correction, sorry. So we're going to take our 92.5, we're going to multiply it by our rise ratio of 0.4166, and there's where we need a calculator. Anybody got the answer there? .38.5 inches. Okay, so what we really did right now is we just figured this side of the triangle. Okay, if we take that 38.5 inches, add it to our 24, we come up with, what is it, 62.5? 62.5 inches is the total height of this wall. Or ridge beam, purlin beam, whatever. The same thing works out. And then, you can subtract your plates off if you got to get a stud length. The other way, if you really, a real trick and all the studs are the same thing, you can just take the stud length of this front wall, whatever they are, 20.5, multiply, add the stud, the beginning stud, to this rise, 38, and that'll get you your stud of that wall. So you don't have to subtract them off. Just a little shortcut. If you've got a beam, though, you're going to have to figure to the top and then take off whatever post or whatever you've got going. Now here, we're going to have to put a bird's mouth of equal depth on our rafters. So whatever we put here, we're going to have to put up there. If, for example, it's an interior wall, non-bearing interior wall, I never run a bird's mouth. I just subtract out the height of the bird's mouth so that rafter goes right on by. Just right on by, and I don't have to screw with any type of bird's mouth there at all, and I don't have to worry the wall's not plumb or whatever. So in order to do that, we just take off the depth of the bird's mouth. I'm going to use 1 inch as the bird's mouth today. Just works out that way. I'll explain to you later. And I'll also explain to you the depth of what's necessary for depth of bird's mouth. That's another question, so remind me when I get to that. Okay, so if we've got a 1 inch bird's mouth, how tall is this wall going to be if we want to run the rafters right on by? What, 61.5 inches, right? What happens if we want to raise this guy up? Can you see all right here, the board? Let's say we want to raise this guy up so the rafters are dying in the top of that beam. What would we do? Do the same thing we've done so far, except we need to add what's called a heel stand. This is the heel stand right here. Okay, it's 2 3/4. Now you can simply lay out one of your bird's mouth and get it, or look at this. This little triangle right here. Little triangle right there. If we know the width of the board, 3.5 inches, we can find this plumb distance mathematically. Remember I said if to find any length along the rake, we multiply by what? Common line length ratio, right? So if we multiplied this width, 3.5 inches, by our common line length ratio, 3.5 times 1.0833, 3 3/4 inches. Take off an inch bird's mouth, same thing. So you don't have to mark it out if you know how to use the little ratios. Okay, so this distance here is 2 3/4. So we would simply add 2 3/4 over here, quarter, 65 1/4, would be the height of this wall if we want to flush the rafters out up top. Let's talk about rake walls. Okay, what do we got? We got our 24-inch wall here, 62.5-inch wall here. We need 3 measurements for a rake wall. The longest, length of the longest stud, length of the shortest stud, length of our top plate. I like to work off of my tall wall to figure all my heights. First thing we got to do is come down below the rafter. So we're going to subtract off the depth of the bird's mouth 1 inch. I don't want to be right on the bottom of that rafter. What happens if I've got a floor that's somebody was alcoholic when they put it in and it's got a big old bow in it? So I take off 1/4. You might need to take off more. I want to get this rake down below that rafter. I don't like sitting up there and planing the top of rafters or cutting out, planing top of walls or cutting out the bottom of rafters. So add some play. I guess if you were real trick, you could set a string across there and see if you got any up and down, but I never do. Besides, half the time you don't cut them perfect anyway. All right, then we've got 2 top plates, right? But what do we got to subtract there? They're at an angle. How do we figure that? I got a little sample. we could simply just sit there and take your speed square and make an angle 5 and 12 and subtract, find out what it is and subtract that off. Or we could use that little math trick again. What do we got? We got a little triangle right here. We got a little triangle. Double the thickness is the run of the roof, and this is the line length, right? Same thing. So we take 3 inches times 1.0833 equals 3 1/4 inches. 3 1/4. So we're going to subtract off 3 1/4. That's got us down to here, and now we just take off the bottom plate, 1.5 inches. And what does that all add up to? 56.5 inches. So our longest stud here, long point of our longest stud, 56.5 inches. Need to know our short point stud. Okay, this plate here is 89 inches. We got another little triangle here. Multiply the 89 by the rise ratio to find the amount that wall falls. So 89 times 0.4166. I got this stuff all figured out. I shouldn't have to work it through every time. I believe it is 37 inches. Does that sound right? Anybody got a fast finger on the calculator? 37 inches is right. So by subtracting that fall off, we come up with 19.5 inches. That's our small one. Top plate length? Any guesses on that? That's easy now. You guys are experts. Anything along an angle is found by doing what? Multiplying the distance on the floor or the distance in the horizontal plane times 1.0833 equals, I just remember, is 96 3/8, I believe. So we've got from here to here is 96 3/8. We've got everything we need to frame that rake wall. So let's go over and do it. Right here I have the plate laid out. You get your layout marks for your studs on it. I got my short point stud marked over here. I've got my long point stud marked over there. Got a length of my top plate circled in the middle. What you need to do, normally, your outside wall is 8 foot. So you would, what I do anyways, grab the plate, and you'd want to move it up just shy of the length of your outside wall. So if I'm 8 foot here, I'd move this up to just about 8 foot. And then I transfer the layout to the ground in about 4 foot increments. But since this thing is only 19 inches long, we're just going to mark it about 2 foot. So what I'm doing here is I'm marking my layout. And this is so I can keep the studs straight when I go to cut them. I love them speed squares, but I had to make these bags up. I couldn't find any that I really liked, and I couldn't find a bag that was big enough. I know a lot of guys slide them in right here, but this one has these little rib to it, and it sticks in the way when you're going for nails over there. So, okay, you can go up another time if you want to. Let's go up one more time, just so I can make sure I cut those things, and you guys don't laugh too much when I screw it up. Okay. Now take this guy back, and what I generally do is toenail it on the line. I'm saying the edge of this plywood is my line. So I'm going to toenail it. 16s, don't want those guys. And that just helps you keep everything straight when you're going through the process of snapping the studs and all that kind of stuff. Oh, I would have to choose a nice bowed one too, wouldn't I? Another thing, these nails kind of help hold when you're standing the rake wall. You don't need to put any little blocks or nothing. They'll just hold the wall. Now, 2 ways to go about building your rake wall. Some guys like to snap the floor. It has its benefits in that Now you know what size pieces of wood to stick down there, so you're going to cut them. I don't do it that way for the simple reason, I do it sometimes, but I don't like to get a lot of snap lines on my floor because I might be doing something else in there and it gets confusing. So I generally snap my studs. I lay my studs out and snap them just like if I was snapping the ground. So, yeah, you can crown your studs. I don't think it's going to matter here, though. And here's the great old pass load gun. I couldn't do these seminars without this thing. I just keep hoping to run into a rich woman so I don't have to do this stuff no more. Okay, I'm lining them back up on their marks. That's a nice twisty one. Okay, we've got our, we'll go ahead and mark our short stud down here. I'll mark our long point stud over here. $56.5, thank you, sir. And we're going to go ahead and snap it. If it'll stay put. I got a real bad stud on the end. Perfect place for it. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to snap it the other direction too, because I'm going to show you the two ways you can do a rake wall. This one I'm off here. I hope I wasn't off when I snapped it before. All right, so I got a little X brace there. Okay, the next thing you do is take your top plate and throw it above the line. And that way you can get your layout right on your plate before you do anything. So if you set it right there, I've pre-cut these ones to, what was it, 96 3/4. And I'll just simply transfer the layout mark straight up. Where it is. That way I don't have to reline them up again when I go back to throw them in. Okay. Now, if you've got yourself a skill saw, the angle will swing very easily. If we turn it to, 22.5 degrees for the pitch of this roof, it'll very easily swing this cut. Okay, he's going to take a look. Okay, because that's the way the foot of the saw goes. So we could just simply walk right through this wall, that direction, real easily. It's not a problem. What about when they go the other way, against the foot of the saw? Well, I'll do one right here. Set your saw to square, full depth. Okay? You'd come in here and line it up on the long point of the stud. Long point of that cut. Simply pick it up and finish. And then just turn it, eyeball that snap line, and cut through. Now, if you have trouble eyeballing it, what you can do is sit here and just like you're going to do a lead end brace, just go through the pile and make a cut like that. Then all you have to do is still do the same thing. wish these studs were a little longer, they would be easier. But now you have a little notch or a little cut that you can just put the saw in, and all you got to do is finish it off. So if you have trouble with your eyeball in those cuts, it's a little difficult when they're so short like that. I guess you're picking them up pretty hard. A lot of guys run the foot of the saw flat down on the floor and then pick up the stud. But remember, there's this little ball here that sticks out past the end of the foot. So if you're going to do it this way, keep this end up a little bit so you're sitting on that nut. That way you get a good straight cut. Okay, now we've got our marks. We just simply have to nail her back together. Let's see if I can hit that. Let's see, where's that plunger coming out? Right there. But it's just a demo, right? Look at this, I can learn. All right, we'll just stick a top plate on and stand her up, a double plate. Is all the wood you guys get back here this twisty and John? Jeez. Yeah, out west coast is always dug fir. It's getting a little worse too as they're trying to grow them with hormones. And I don't know why the president doesn't do something about drugs for trees. Trying to solve everything else. Okay, we're all ready. So, see these little nails help us stand her up. And we should be down a little over an inch here. Yeah, we're right on an inch. That's why that 1/4 inch comes in handy. I'm going to put it, I was originally going to put it right on the corner, but now I'm going to put it right here underneath where I'm going to run a set of doublers. Carpeting is what it is. These other walls are screwed down, so they're down tight. All right, we're going to cut some rafters, fit from the front wall to the back wall. You guys should know how to figure line length, same way we figured it for our top plate, right? Here's a little sample. It's actually something from later on. There's two parts of the rafter we're concerned with. Right down here is called a bird's mouth. It's going to fit up on the wall like that. You've got two cuts. One is in the vertical plane. That's called a heel cut. That's why the distance above it was called a heel stand. The horizontal cut is called the seat cut. That sits on the wall. Up here you've got a square cut, which is a ridge cut. It's going to bang into the ridge. When I'm talking about plumb cuts, most people know what this is. This would be, if you set your little speed square up for 5 and 12, that's the plumb cut for this roof. Well, just as we found the top plate length, we use this dimension, this 89, to find the top plate length. We're going to find the line length between our two bird's mouth by using the rafter is going to be traveling from here to here and basically dropping down vertically. So if we put a 1 inch there and a 1 inch there, it'll drop right down. What's the line length? The distance between those, the distance between those two take our 92.5, multiply it by our common line length ratio. It's 125, is it not? Okay. So we're going to be putting two heel cut lines at 125 inches apart. I've got, well, before I go over there, let me talk a little bit about production roof cutting. How many of you guys, when you've built a house, have taken a bunch of studs and stuck them up against a wall flat like you need to? You've got a 7-foot wall and they sent you out 8-footers and you want to cut these guys all at once, so you'll stick them over against a straight surface, stick them on a little board right here, snap a line at 7 foot and cut them. Well, gang cutting rafters is exactly the same thing. It's just, think of it just like building that little wall. Same thing, except now you're building it out of plane on an angle here. I kind of see that way anyway, so it looks flat to me. But what I do when I come out to the job is I'll usually grab a couple 2x12s. What I'm trying to do is build a rack to put these rafters on. It's about yay high, 2 foot, 2.5 feet high. This is pretty good working height with these guys, you know, somewhere up in here. If I use 2x12s, that's about right, because usually your rafters are going to, let me draw a better picture here. Okay, throw a couple sleepers or stickers down on the ground. I like to use some beams, that way it gives me a couple extra inches. If I got a 2.5, 3 foot chunk of 4x12, I'll throw one down and throw one down. Give me enough length on the rack so I can rack these rafters on edge. We're looking at a side shot right here. Here's my 2x12s. You know, if it's a long distance, run two of them. Run a couple kickers here to keep that thing from rolling. So I've got these doublers sitting on top of the sleeper with a couple kickers here to keep it from rolling. Now you've got, if you can imagine this rack of rafters now, bingo, bingo, bingo. We've got this rack running underneath over to another setup over here, same identical thing on the other end of this board. The trick about these racks is you want them to be fairly close to level before you put your rafters on it. You don't want to be looking at a rack that's like this, because then the boards sit there and they all want to lean. So get it fairly close to level. Your first rack is going to be about a foot in from where you're going to cut your ridge cut. Your next rack you're going to want to put right under where you're going to cut your bird's mouth, as close as possible. What happens if you've got rafters of different lengths? Well, then you've got to take the average and put this one out, move it forward, cheat it forward, and on some of them, if their bird's mouth is in here, it's going to be behind it. Some of them, it's going to be in front of it. So you just take them. What you're trying to do is get all those boards to be sitting flat right where you're going to be gang cutting them. Okay, so a neat little trick over here is to take and run some wax on the top of these racks. Just some little paraffin wax, household wax. It makes sliding things around a lot easier. So if you wax the top of those racks, you can slide them back. It works real good with beams. I cut a house just 2 weeks ago, 28 beams, big old mother beams. We're talking 18, 20-inch beams. And I mean, by waxing the top of those racks, we could just push it and it slide it out of the way, you know. So it's a real good trick. Run it on the foot of your saw when you're going to make some long cuts. Run it on the end of boards if you're trying to beat the board in, it doesn't fit. Run it a little bit on the top of that stud and it'll slap right over. Okay, I think we've covered racks. Oh, no, we didn't finish on racks. Okay, you've got your front rack. What you want to make sure, if it's not perfectly level, no big deal, get it close. But your second rack, it has to be exactly to plane in. It has to be exactly parallel. So when you bend over and you eyeball those two racks, they're going to be in the same plane. You don't want one going one way and one going the other. You want them in the same plane. If they're a little slope, fine, but make sure they're parallel to each other. A lot of guys ask, how big of a bird's mouth should we make? I've read books that say 2/3 of the board, this, that, and the other. Well, coming from a roof cutter's perspective, forget all that garbage, okay? What I asked an engineer how much bearing you need. He told me 3/4 of an inch is technically what you need, but there's safety factors that they multiply, and you end up needing something like 2 inches for good bearing. And if you notice, if you go to Simpson or any of these other guys, how big is a hanger? 2 inches, 2 1/4. The reason I'm telling you 2 1/4 inches is because that's all you could get with this saw. Production roof framing started, as far as I know, in Southern California because of the amount of houses they were putting up, and everything was piece priced, which means you got paid so much for doing one task. When I quit doing cutting there, I was getting paid 5 cents a square foot to cut roofs. 1,000 square foot house, I was getting paid $50, right? So you got to do a lot of houses if you want to make some money. Of course, this was back in the early 70s, mid 70s. So guys were coming up with little ideas to shorten everything. That's why gang cutting came about. They go, man, we don't have to sit there and cut each one at a time. We could do a bunch of them and just walk away, and they're left there. Well, somebody, I don't know who, this saw here is called the 117 Groover. It was designed by Skill. If you talk to the Skill guys, they have no concept of what it is. I only know a few people who really know about it. My friend Nate Fletcher was the one who built my saw. He built most every chipper saw that was ever built. This one here came from Skill like this. This is how it came from Skill. It was called a groover, which means that you just simply set the depth and ran it down into the beam to run a groove for your wires. It's the same kind of setup. Anyway, it came with 2 inches worth of dados. All right, what you could do is you could squeak on another 1/4 inch, which I have done here. And that is why I kind of stick with my bird's mouth anywhere from 2 1/4 to 2 3/4. I kept telling everybody about this saw, that this is really where production roof cutting began. So I wanted to get a hold of one. And I'm going to use this guy today. I'm going to have to pull that guard off. The trouble with this is it's not designed to swing an angle. So guys were coming in here and just cutting it. You notice that the foot has the ability, because they just took a 10-inch saw, which had the same table. They added an extension to come out to here. So it has the ability. And some smart guy back there in the 50s or whenever they started doing piecework said, heck, man, you know, I turn this sucker at an angle, I can cut a bird's mouth. The other way to cut that bird's mouth is a swing table. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen a swing table before. You can make this cut with your skill saw. That's what, 22.5 degrees, the pitch of the roof. This one is what, the complement to equal 90. So it's going to be 22.5, 68, 67.5 degrees. Well, Skill does have a saw which will go to 60 now. They just built one a couple years ago. And that'll get you some pitches. But this thing will swing all the way down to, basically I use this on my steeper pitches because I use my dado saw on anything up to like 6, 7, 8, 12. It works real good. Once it gets over that, I'm starting to eat out too much meat to get that much bearing. I'm having to take too much meat out, and it's real, I want to save my saw, so I'll start using the swing table once I get that steep. But this one works fine, and I'm going to demonstrate both. Since we're putting a bird's mouth up here and we're putting a bird's mouth down here, I'm going to do one, the ridge cut, the one that's going to sit up on the ridge with the dado, and I'm going to do the other one with the swing table. Let's go over here and lay this guy out. I've got these things racked. I came in about 1 3/4 inches. The tough part about doing what I'm going to be doing here is I have very little to set the big saw on. So, it's such a small board, and usually if it was a long board, I'd have a bit more distance to put the foot on. So we'll see how it works. If you fall over and you got blood squirting everywhere, you know what happened. Okay, 5 and 12. All right, I came in 1 3/4 inches. I'm going to draw my first plumb line. No, yeah. Then I'm going to go over 1 3/4 inches, half of that beam right there, draw my second line. Okay, that's going to be the heel cut of my rafters. Now this line is awful thick, so do you guys mind? Can you see all right if I use a pencil? Does that show up? Good enough? It'd just be a little better for following. I mean, I don't want you guys to sit there and laugh at me again when my bird's mouth's 5 feet open. All right, so since I'm going to do this end with the chipper saw, that's the only line I need. It's one line because it's going to take care of it. 125 inches is where we need to put the bird's mouth for the outside wall. We're going to come back and get that back cut in a second, but I just want to go ahead and lay out. So 125. And down on this end, since I'm using the swing table, I'm going to make two marks. Can you see this good enough down here? Okay, on the other end of the board, I've got one line there. That's fine for my heel cut with a regular skill saw. Now what about this one? How do I figure out where to put this line over here? Well, you could draw it once again, or we figured 2¼ inches is what I set this bird's mouth for, 1 inch deep, 2¼ And why I set 1 inch deep was because I knew that I'm going to use the chipper saw, right? And that's as big as it's going to cut. So that's going to determine the depth of my bird's mouth. So I simply took the 2¼ This is a little right triangle here once again, right? This is the rise. That is the run. 2¼ times 0.411 gives me just a taste under 1 inch, so we'll just call it 1 inch. Now, how about where this line is? There's another little triangle, guys, and what is this? That's the hypotenuse, or we use the line length ratio to find that length. So 2¼ times 1.0833 gives the distance between these two. Carry those right on across. So that's how I got this second mark right over here. And I've got them both done here. Let me set the old chipper up, and we'll make some bird's mouth. Oh, no, I need to finish this end. Well, because this is a 45, if I did it with my pattern, this would work for anything other than 45. You just simply use your pattern and mark it up and bring this line straight across, right? Well, because I know this is a 45 double 22½, I could cheat and go whatever I did over here, I can do up here and make a little straight line here, maybe. So now if I run the saw right on the end of this at a 45, it should come out in the peak if I've got enough blade, and that's what I don't know. If I 8¼ I can get a little bigger. See, so it all depends on the size saw you've got. The bigger the blade, the farther you can come out, and the more back cut you can give the guys, but I generally just run an 8¼ of that thing, so. Let me get my skill saw, we'll make that pass real quick. Pretty good. These guys are so little. All right. We'll make our bird's mouth. We'll use the old dado saw. Now, yeah, does a quick job of that. Okay, for the other one, make my heel pass right here. Okay, use the swing table. Ready? All right. That's the other thing. This thing costs $70, $80. Anybody can get into it. I shouldn't say anybody, but most people. That thing, that's, if you can even find one, it's going to cost you $1,000. I mean, it takes a lot of roofs to make back $1,000. And I'll show you some of the other stuff to make the ridge cuts. You can get into them for $150, so you're all set up for cutting roofs. Yeah, it takes you a little more time. It's a little bit more difficult, actually, with the swing table because they tend to bind and stuff. but it's still, you're set up for $250 when you get the protsy for cutting your ridge and stuff like that versus $1,000 plus there's another saw that I don't have, but it's another $1,000. What I did here is I lay out my doublers to flush up with the inside of my walls, which, okay, let's say our outside 72 inches, got a 3.5 wall, we're going to come in 7 inches, so we're 65.5, and that's where I set the inside ones, inside rafters, okay? See, I told you there'd be long pauses, guys. I'm not thinking. I'm just doing. Okay, let's move on to our next little topic, which is starting this dormer. I've got two little angle walls over here, and I just chose, well, actually, I chose a dimension because it would make it easier. I'm going to show them to you real quickly. Does anybody have any, oops, sorry, too close. What I did was I just laid out 4 rafters, and I chose that as the length of my top plate, and from there I worked on finding the front of my little rake wall, just like we did before. So if I chose 48 3/4 as the length of my top plate, that was just so I get 1, 2, 3, and the 4th one's right there. If it had been any shorter or longer, I probably would have ended up with one kind of dying inside, and it's kind of a mess to show. But I got 48 3/4. What's the front of this thing going to be? You guys should be well versed at using rise ratio. 48 3/4, 0.4166, right? Rise ratio for 5 and 12, 20 1/4. How about the length of this bottom plate? 48 3/4 times common line length ratio. I think it's 50. Anybody figure it out real quick on the calculator? I got mine right here. I think it's 52 3/4 if I can recall. 48.75 times 1.0833. 52 7/8. Say I call it 3/4, it's shy. So that's how we built those little guys. Let's go ahead and start in. I don't have to hit it to the second. Well, we'll just kind of keep going, and then when you guys start walking away, I'll know you're really, really hungry. 6-foot dormer. $72 inches outside. Oh boy, I did a much better job here. 20 1/4 height to this. What does our heel stand? 2 3/4. We got a little triangle we want to figure right here, so we can figure the total height. Line length on a gable such as this, we take the 72.5 is our span. 72, what am I doing? 72.5. Subtract off the full thickness of this ridge, 1.5 inches. Divide by 2 to find the effective run. Effective run, what I mean is really what that rafter is really traveling. This ridge could be 1.5 inches, or it could be 7 miles. It doesn't matter. This is a flat roof. In my book, it's nothing. Just get rid of it. Totally get rid of it. So we don't have to deal with any shortening. We don't have to deal with nothing. It's gone. Divided by 2 times line length ratio, 1.0833 should be, I don't want to use my calculator. I think it's 38 1/8. Anybody check me? So the effective run is actually, what, 35 1/4. So I think it's 38 1/8. Is that right? I should have it written down there. 38 1/8, yes. Side view. What about this ridge? What about this head out? How do we figure that stuff? Does anybody see some similarity here? Do we have a triangle there or not? Yes, we do. We got 20 1/4 inches, top of our plates. 2 3/4 heel stand right there. Plus, what's the rise for that effective run? The rise for that effective run is 35 1/4 times 0.4166 equals 14 5/8. I'm just going from memory here. Right? Or you want me guys to work it out, make sure I'm not screwing up? I'll work it out. $35.25 times 0.4166, 14 5/8. Would have helped if I could have remembered my wife's name as well as I remember numbers. Okay, what's the total side? What's the total length of this side? I'm going to cheat. Look on my notes. 37 5/8. Total all these guys up. Can we not find that side? There's a little trick. Not really a little trick. I'm sure half of you guys are engineers, so it's quick. Take this number here, 37 5/8. Divide this whole mess by 0.4166. And that'll give us the run for that rise. So, I remember this one too, 90 1/2. It's the length of our ridge, 90 1/2. All right, now let's say, well, we want to set this head out right up here. How do we find a slant distance? 90 1/2 times the common line length ratio. Anything on a slant equals, no, I don't remember this one, 98. So from here to here, we can sit there and we can make a mark and we know where to set our top head out. Okay, we've got these little walls, so we're going to go ahead and put them up, set our ridge, and put up our commons. But first, let's talk about, let's go ahead and cut our common rafters. We'll be all set up and we can just go over there and work real quickly. Working from the head cut end of the pile of rafters, remember we're sitting on some racks. These are gigantic rafters here that we're... Go ahead, just come in far enough so you can get a good ridge cut here. If I come in this far, I don't usually, I kind of know how far to come in, but if you're a little bit unfamiliar, take your speed square and set to 5 12. That's the other thing. We're dealing with 5 12, everything we're doing here. Okay, come in far enough so you can get a good ridge cut. Snap line, I'm not sure if it'll show up real well. I just kind of eyeball this. Okay, that's our ridge cut line. The length of our commons was 38 1/8. Measure towards the tail, 38 1/8. And we're going to make another line for our heel cut. Now, if you're doing really fancy beams or something like that, gang cutting them using this method, I sometimes check diagonals on the pile and make sure I've got this line pretty good. That way you can, when you're running the saw through there, you got a really straight line. And I'm only going to make one line here because I'm going to use the dado saw once again. Let me check that. Got so many marks on here, I might confuse myself. which I don't want to do. Already confused enough as it is. 38 1/8. Okay. We didn't talk anything about production cutting of the ridge. In the same time when this saw was modified into use in the tracks, there was no such thing as a Makita beam saw. There was no such other tools. What guys came up with was what they did was they took their skill saw, they set it at the pitch of the roof, 22 1/2, set it, buried it to depth, ran through the pile of rafters like that. Then they took this little blade right here, called a sidewinder blade. Okay, you cannot find one of these anymore, so don't ask me where you can get them. Besides, OSHA don't like them. But basically what you did was you put it in place of the blade, the other blade, and it would bolt on just like here. And since it sits, wonderful speech patterns I have. Since it sits outside the guard, you can just imagine this. You can just simply finish that cut right on off. That piece falls off, and you're ready to do the next one. So you just go right through the pile. Bam, 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 bam. You'd end up with a nice smooth cut. Okay, that was one way. A friend of mine, Nate again, using a motor that's similar to this, the 127 12-inch skill saw, modified it to have a 20-inch blade on it. Then guys would just not even have to make this curve, and they were just running through there. And remember, in the track days too, we're only dealing with 2x6 rafters, and I think with the 20-inch you might be able to do 2x8, as long as it's not too steep pitch. That's about the time Makita came into the market using their saw, which doesn't nearly have the power that these guys do. And I don't use a beam saw to cut the ridge cuts. What is available on the market today is the Protzi saw. And they're selling them at the show here. It works very good for this kind of a cut. On the bird's mouth, once again, we will simply take the dado saw or the swing table and make this cut. We got our commons cut. We got all our commons cut. We've got our ridge cut. The length of our ridge, 90 1/2. We've got a head out up there of in between 65. And let's put this stuff together. What I'm going to do is line my little walls up with the front. This is a plumb line mark right there. I'm going to line them up on the inside with a little mark I had. Get to use my little impulse again. Notice I'm fleshing them out with the inside. Out here, just run a cleat. I'm going to stick a tack. I am thankful very much for use of this impulse. Okay, I've got a little tie here. I'm going to throw it across here, and I've got a little, keep it out of the way of my rafters. $72. Make sure I'm doing about right. 72, a little big. Okay, we need to plumb it up a little. Let's see. We wanted to go down to this plate line right down here. Let's say we wanted to just stick a stick up there just to help us, a temporary stick, go down to this plate. We found the total rise of 37 5/8, right? That's to the top of these rafters. We have a heel stand distance of 2 3/4 if we want to go down to this little plate here. So if I want to cut a brace to go right in underneath this, a temporary brace, my dimension would be 37 5/8 from this sheet plus the 2 3/4 minus the ridge is 2.75 minus 3.5. I got 36 7/8. Anybody second that? Let's put a few of these, just 2 of these for right now, because I want enough room in there to work on the valley, which we're going to do in a few minutes. What was our dimension up the rake? Was 98. Was our diagonal distance was 98. Make a mark there. Remember that from first session. 98. Should be right on the lines there. Good. See if I'm spread here at all. No, I'm undersized. So we'll just throw something in the middle just to keep it right. Because right now it's a 1/2 inch under, and I don't want to have something a 1/2 inch under. I like everything to be as close to right as could be. It's going to change the position of where my valleys come in. Yeah, a little bit. A little bit under, shouldn't be a problem. This is just a temporary. This is just to get the thing to spread correctly. That's all that is. Not permanent, not anything. And if we get a couple of plumb lines for where we're going to put our head out up here. It's almost right up against this wall. I might need a little bit of. I'm just sticking a block in here so it makes it easier to one-man it here. Am I going to get in the way of anything else? No. And once again, these little pieces I'm putting in are just to make it easy for me to set this little guy by myself. And I'm going to put a little backing nail there too, so when I throw that head out up, I don't have to mess with it sliding around on me. Okay, I got my head out cut. 65 inches, the measurement of the inside. And we'll flush it up top here. stick a couple nails in it. Okay, I have my center mark here. That's all that is from my ridge coming straight out. I've got my 90.5-inch ridge pre-cut right here. And you could either stack this by taking two rafters, setting them up on the end, or we calculated a little bit of height, the height of the stick. And since I'm kind of working by myself, I'm going to go ahead and stick it in just for temporary sake. I think I'll stick a couple of tacks back here while I'm there. Thank you, Mr. Carl. And I'm going to hop out here, throw up a couple comments for you. One for this side and one for this side. All right, we got the skeleton set up. I'm going to skip these other commons for the time being, like I said, so I have a little bit more room to walk around in there. And this should be plumb into that ridge if there's no play in that head out, and it is. So we did something right. We don't know what it is, but we did it. We're ready for our valleys. Here's what we got. We're looking down on this thing. All right. We've got these little walls go to about here. What we want to do is throw in two inside valleys and some little inside jacks. God, that one is a little overweight. That one got a little too much to eat. So I'm kind of trying to draw this out the best I can for you guys. Where we're at right now is we've got these two guys up. We've got this up. I left those out. We're going to work on these two valleys. Now, we do the same way we figured the commons for this. We're going to use the same procedure. We're just going to use a different ratio. What is our span? Our inside span is 65 inches. They're inside. We're going to subtract off the thickness of the ridge, divide it in half to find the effective run, distance from there to there, multiply it by, 1.4743, the hip valley line length ratio, and we get whatever. I should bring my notebook up here so I can make sure. So we've got 65 minus 1.5 divided by 2 times 1.4743, 4746, don't want that one. 1.4743 equals 46 3/4. Okay, so that's going to be the line length of our valley from center of this single cheek cut to the tip of our valley at the upper end where it runs in between those two, the head out and the ridge. At the same time, let's go ahead and talk about these jacks. Let's just go ahead and we'll cut the valley and the jacks at the same time and throw them up all at once. This drawing is still good enough to use. If it gets too cluttered, I will move it. We've got from here to here 48 3/4 inches. That was the length of our top plate. That's the reason I chose that once again is so I ended up with one right here and I didn't, the last one just made it easier on me. We've got a distance, if you notice this triangle right here, what is that triangle? This is 31, and what is that half of that? Should be 31 3/4, is that right? 31 3/4. This is 31 3/4. Because there's a 45, this is 31 3/4. What we're trying to do is we're trying to find the distance between these two. We don't need it to set this valley, but we need it to find this first jack. Let me backtrack and say in the tracks and in a normal situation, your longest valley jack is the same length as your common. That's your longest one, and you basically step shorter, one step for each spacing shorter on each of the jacks. Does everybody know what a step is? Nobody knows what a step is. It's the amount that each one is shorter in the line length. Okay, if this is, we're doing 12-inch centers. If this is 12 inches spacing, this guy is going to be not 12 inches, but if we were looking at this in the vertical plane, this would be 12 inches. So the step would be the line length of 12 inches or the step of or the line length of whatever spacing you've got. So in our case, we've got 12 inches on center times our line length ratio. That's 13. And remember that because that triangle we did earlier, that's what it was. What happens if we've got a 16-inch center? Or a 24-inch center? What is our step? How much shorter do each one of those jacks get from the longest one? Same thing. 16 on center would be 16 times 1.0833 equals 17 and a fat quarter. I don't deal in 16ths. I don't know what they are. 24 times 1.0833, 26 inches. Okay, so but what we're looking at here is I'm doing a little different. I want to keep this 12-inch center all the way through just for no reason whatsoever, but it's nice to do. I just thought I'd show you the method. We know it's 31 from here to here, plus this little bit there. And what is that little bit there? That is half of the 45-degree thickness of that board, which is about 1 inch. So we've got from here to here is actually 32 3/4. And if we take this 31 3/4 and this 48 3/4 and subtract it from our 90.5 ridge length, we'd find this piece to be 9 inches. So we've got a distance of 9 inches right here. So if we're 12-inch center, how much farther is it to this same side from here to here? It's another 3 inches. Okay, I want the long point, so I'm going to be 1.5 inches plus 9, so I'm going to be 10.5 to this edge. I'm just going to match this side now. Have I lost anybody? I'm going to set up gang cutting my valley jacks at the long point, so I need to know long point. Realistically, this is 12-inch center, but this is 12-inch center from this side. So I just subtracted 1.5 inches because we got a little triangle right there. So from here to here is 1.5 inches. So how much shorter is it? We got another little triangle. It's 1.5 inches shorter than 31 3/4. So the run, effective run of this thing, I'm doing just what they told me not to do, getting too much stuff on one sheet. 31 3/4 minus 1.5 is our effective run of our longest jack, and that is 31.75 minus 1.5, 30 1/4. We would multiply 30 1/4 by, we want to find in the slant, 1.0833 times 1.0833 is 32 3/4. So our longest jack is going to be 32 3/4, and likewise the one that comes down and pairs up with this one on the opposite side is going to be, the long point is also going to be 32 3/4. The size material you need for your hip jacks or your valley jacks is the same size you order out for your commons. A lot of guys do different sizes, just order them out, and because I'm going to show you the way we cut jacks in the track. This 4 foot, same length I had for these guys. On our longest jack was what? 32 3/4. Can you see that? Everybody see that on the screen? Okay, I mark long point. I made a ridge cut here first, snapped the line straight across the top of the pile. That's going to be my ridge cut, just like for these commons. That's my ridge cut. Here's my line length. And what did I say each one was shorter if we're going 12 inches on center? 13 inches. I make a little board, little pattern, just so I don't have to do my tape there and get confused. So now, normally on the job, it's 16 on center, so I'll have one pattern and it's just my step pattern. I don't have to pull out my tape. I don't have to forget the number. We'll simply take and step off to the long point of the next one, step off to the long point of the next one, and we don't need any more because we run past there. Now, the thing we want to do is we want to lay out the other side off of the scrap of the first pile. So, all right, we've got our shortest one down here, right? How we measured the long point, and we want the long point of the other set to match the short point of the first one. Well, how do we find how much it is without cutting it? Once again, here's where our little triangle method comes into effect. That board is traveling 1.5 inches, right? So we would multiply that by the line length ratio, 1.0833, and it's about 1 5/8 inches. So that's where how we're going to pretend you haven't cut this stuff. I pre-cut it just so it made it quicker. I would simply take 1 5/8 inches and mark over here. Now I found the long point of the first one on the other side. Measuring backwards, 32 3/4. I think I added a little much there. Make a mark, measure from line to line, transfer it over to here, and snap your line. I cut 2 sets here, that's why you're going to see it double. Now, I've got them all marked. I'll come down to this end, make my ridge cut. Remember, all these cuts are going the same way. That's why when you do valley jacks, you've got to either get really straight ones, or you've either got to crown half the pile on this end, crown down, half the pile on this side, crown up. Because this side now, if I make the ridge cut down here, which I can do, here's my rack, right? Same thing, run the proxy right through there, run the proxy right through there. I've got these 2 ridge cuts. Now I'm dealing with this. And in the tracks, what we used to do is simply just take our saw, set it at a 45, and zip through them. These 2 would fall away. Sometimes what I do is I take this whole pile and turn it on edge. I don't know which would be better for the camera. Let me see if I can roll it. Yeah, it worked all right. So, you can do it either way. In the tracks, you don't want to sit there and be rolling stuff. You just want to blow and go. So, set my saw. I've got my 5 and 12, my 5 and 12. This is going to be a 5 and 12 too. So, zingo, cut through there. Okay, here's my next mark. Mark it. My saw goes through there. And now my third one. Okay, now I have cut 2 sets, and they're going to be opposite sets. So we have cut now the valley jacks, they're going here, and the valley jacks are going the other side. If we wanted to run the valley jacks here, it's the same line length because they're coming right off the opposite side. So we just go ahead and cut another set. Make our first cut. You could just set your saw a little bit deeper than what you need to cut through it. You'll see a curve because I did this last night. Just make a curve, make a curve, make a curve. There's your 2 different sets. Everybody catch that? So you've used no more wood. You haven't made it. The trouble is you got to follow this through. It works really well. I'm going to go ahead and set one of these sets over there. I don't know if I'll put both of them up. So I can grab them on the inside. I'll go ahead and put this one over there just in case I change my mind. I feel real energetic. Valleys. We got the length for it. Let's go ahead and lay it out. I did one of them already, but let's lay out the other one. Line length was 46 3/4. We've come in far enough from this end. We make a mark. Measure our line length. 46 3/4. Make a mark. I have a slash here because I want to make sure I didn't cut 2 of the same thing. Just always make them opposing when you're doing pairs. If you're going to go this way, that one goes that way, and you won't have to worry about it. You'll get 2 opposites. Now, don't forget to change your square. I don't know how many times I've done this. Cut everything at a nice 5 and 12 common. So change it to 5 and 12 hip and valley. We're going to make a plumb line at our line length line. We're going to come half the thickness of the valley material perpendicular to the plumb line away. This is a very nice square because it's already set up with 3/4 little spacing. And draw ourselves a line. If you transfer that line all the way across to the other side and make another plumb line, we have now got our 45 marked for our double cheek cut. On this end, remember we said that was, in our drawing, this is a center measurement. No big deal. We do the same thing we did up there. We draw a plumb line, hip and valley, 5 and 12. And we want to get a cheek cut, a single cheek cut, so I already had it slashed that way, so I know, okay, I'm going to go downhill on this guy because of my saw will cut this way. Mark half the thickness once again. Draw another plumb line. This is what that's where I'm going to cut with a 45. Sorry, Carl. Okay, got that guy cut. This one, I want to cut the angle that way, so I'm going to have to cut it here. Got our 2 valleys and our valley jacks. And at the same time, I'm going to talk about the hip, because they're done identically except for the bird's mouth is the only difference between the 2. Line length is figured the same. The ridge cut is exactly the same. Line length of a hip is measured to the corner of the building. How do we determine the depth of the bird's mouth on a hip? A lot of guys talk about dropping the hip. Well, yes, what we're really trying to do is line this edge of the hip up with the plane of the commons. In order to do that, what we want is the heel stand that's right there to be the same right there, because we want this edge to line up. So how far is that uphill from our line length line? If this is 3/4, that's up 3/4. So we would measure uphill perpendicular to that first line length line. This is our line length line. We're going to measure up here, draw another hip and valley plumb line. That's where we're going to measure our heel stand. 2 3/4 inches, and draw a level seat cut line right through there. What about a valley? A valley, line length is measured there. We want the center of that valley to line up with these commons. So therefore, we want to put the heel stand of these common rafters right there. And that happens to be what? The line length line. So the difference between a hip and a valley, if we're looking at the board now, here's my line length line. The hip, we're going to go 3/4 uphill, measure our heel stand. Valley, we're going to measure it right on the line length line. The hip, we're going to just square cut it on 2x material, since this little gap here, if we square cut it, you could, of course, sit here and V-notch this thing or whatever. But it's 2x material, and by the time you get your siding on it, it's going to cover that up. So 2x, we'll just square cut it right at the long point, which would be right here. We draw this line all the way through, square cut it here, square cut it there for the hip, and we're done. The valley, we don't want to square cut it there, right? It's not going to fit. So we need to come outboard. How much is this? Half the thickness. Same thing, once again, 3/4 of an inch here. Draw us another plumb line, and now here's our valley. We're going to square cut it right there. Everybody following that? Got it pretty good. So maybe if I draw 2 different pictures. Here's the line length line. We've got the hip marked here to there. This is hip. The valley marked here to here. So our heel stand is right here, and this is line length line right there. And that automatically takes care of everything you've got to do on hips or valleys as far as dropping and backing and all that confusing stuff. All you got to remember is that. Center of the valley lines up with the ridge. And down here, I don't know if you can see it. Let me clean the edge off so you can see it. The center of this valley is going to line up with this guy. Valley jacks, we'll throw those in. Easier to work from top to bottom. Okay, the valley, the jack, should line up center of the valley. Isn't it fun building? Don't you guys like it? I mean, building a roof's kind of trick. What do we got going here? Can't be the gun. These things are bulletproof. operator error, as they would say, right? Oops. A little bit loose on that one. You guys remind me before we go, I got a great joke been wanting to tell forever. You guys, how many of you guys have ever heard the joke, McCurk and Beanpole? Nobody's ever heard it? Oh, good, I'll tell it. It's a great joke. I won't tell it now, though, because I got to do a few actions. That's if we get everything done. They make me finish everything first. Can't quit. Can't quit before we're done. You know, this wood you guys got real waxy, too. Probably don't need to use your paraffin wax out here. All right, I'm going to throw these commons in real quick because I have nothing better to do. So it looks like a house, too. We want it to look like a nice little house. I have to reach it from here. I sunk that one a little bit too far down. I'll let the apprentices come over here and fix it up a little bit. Okay. Boy, by George, it worked. The joke? Can we do the joke? All right, I'll tell you the joke. There's these two coaches. It's a football joke. There's these two coaches that are arguing over. One's a basketball coach, and one is a football coach, and they're arguing over who has the dumbest guys in the school. Football goes, no, I got the dumbest guys in the school, man. They're out there beating each other up every day. And so they have this bet going, and he says, okay, they go into the office, and they say, office lady, football coach goes, please call in McCurk. A couple minutes later, this big guy comes in, bam, bam, hits both his shoulders into the door and says, yes, coach? You wanted me? He said, yeah. McCurk, here's $10. Will you go down to the corner store and buy me a new Cadillac? Yes, coach. Bam, bam, hits the shoulder and runs out. He says, no, man, isn't that stupid? I mean, the basketball coach said, that's nothing. Office lady, please call in Beanpole. The office lady calls in Beanpole. The big old guy comes, bam, hits his head on the door, runs in. Yeah, coach, you wanted me? Yeah, Beanpole, why don't you run over to my office and check and see if I'm there? Yes, coach, bam. Runs out. Okay, these two guys run into each other out there. Beanpole and McCurk. Hey, hi, Beanpole. Hi, McCurk. How you doing? Man, my coach is acting weird. Your coach is acting weird. Mine wants me to go down and buy a new Cadillac. Well, his old one's working just fine. And he said, and Beanpole goes, yeah, my coach wanted me to run over and go check, see if he's in the office when there's a telephone right there. Thanks, guys. I had a good time.